Hi, folks. Welcome to SMPTE's panel. This one is called Future Frames. Future Frames actually started at last year's NAB as a conversation, as all good conversations are. We were over drinks and we were talking about really what we felt like the role of AI was going to continue to be. If you'll recall, we were very much in a point where we didn't know the implications. Candidly, I'll say we're still not there. But somehow over the course of that evening, the conversation went from these are great ideas to, hey, I think this is a book. And then somewhere over the last year, that book has become a series of conversations with SMPTE around how we turn that into a potential podcast. So I want to bring on our panel and introduce folks for our first of what I hope are mini discussions around the role that AI is playing in a variety of different parts of the business. I'll be joined always by Doug Daulton. Doug is a producer in the industry. And then we have Alex and Dimitro from Respeecher. Respeecher is an audio AI company that's become, well, frankly, you've been around for quite a while, but you continue to grow in notoriety. And I think this year was possibly the most press that I recall seeing about you in the 7 or 8 years that you've been a company. Before we dive into the conversation, though, maybe we could watch a quick video you brought so that we'll set the stage for those who maybe aren't as familiar with some of the work that Respeecher is responsible for.
Size matters not.
Kenobi is all that matters now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My guess is you have certain preconceptions about me.
Well, hello there. I'm James Stewart.
Wir wollten unsere Kinder gemeinsam aufwachsen sehen.
Nothing is better than seeing the homies win and go far. So get courage to be who you are. Never forget that we
穿过黑暗的道路，去陪我心动指引。
In our finest hour, our greatest fulfillment to all we hold dear.
Preto, milí rodáci, smelo dokončujte.
A prophecy in Carrotland.
Birazdan size de güzel bir masal anlatacağım.
Aber irgendwann muss ja mal Schluss sein mit dem Todsein.
Today marks 3 months since the disappearance.
They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation.
May the force be with you.
That's an amazing reel. I love seeing that, and I recognize a lot of those productions. Alex, I'll sort of start with you. Maybe can you sort of set the stage for us? Please just describe what Respeecher is and what specifically is the technology you're bringing to the industry.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's great to be here. So Respeecher is from the very early innings of the audio synthetic audio space in Hollywood. And our initial goal when we established the company a while ago, like more than 7 years ago, was to create synthetic voice on that level of quality and usability where Hollywood studios would use it, where it would be appreciated by the sound engineers who would be able to mix it into Dolby Atmos. Right now, we are at the stage where we are a trusted voice partner to studios as well as to individuals whose voices we are creating or recreating for those productions. Over time, we delivered more than 180 projects of a different scale, including some of the recent stuff we got at Oscars, like 4 pieces, Better Man, Alien Romulus, The Brutalist, and The Milleperes.
Very good. Dimitro, maybe I could ask you, could you sort of describe a little bit about what is the process for the synthetic audio generation that you guys are doing?
Sure. Yeah, I guess we went through like a lot of different processes, but currently, essentially, it's broken down into additional data assessment by our team. So the client, the training data of the targeted voice that we want to replicate is the most important part. So the first step is for our sound engineering team to take a look at the available data, see if it's good, if there's enough of it to achieve the quality that the client needs. And then we do the training or tuning of a specific kind of model that is appropriate for that specific, for the client's requested use case. And then our engineering, some of our synthetic speech artists, one of our synthetic speech artists starts working with the client and going through the iterations of generating samples. The client comes back with some maybe adjustments, maybe they want to change the thing. And then we kind of proceed with the project like this until it's delivered.
So your process is a fairly hands-on, directly with the studios as you work through the training elements.
Yeah, typically, I mean, there's different cases. We also have a self-serve platform where some clients prefer to just kind of work on their own, and once the model is trained and deployed, we just kind of just give it to them, and they work from the UI. But oftentimes, they want to leverage our experience of knowing how the model behaves under certain circumstances. So oftentimes for like big projects, it is we're pretty involved in the process as well.
Now, and so thank you for that. And I recall, I think the first time I heard of Respeecher, you were part of a Comcast accelerator originally, which goes back to some of the earliest days. And I think, Alex, you mentioned this was sort of 7 or 8 years ago at this point. From either of you or both of you, how has the process of training the models changed and adapted over the time, and what has the changes in the output or the quality sort of been like? Because I feel like every 6 months is almost a decade of technology advancements in AI at this point. So what is the last 70 years of AI advancement look like then in your world?
Yeah, I think initially it was interesting. So initially we went with a supervised approach, which kind of just means that in order to train a speech-to-speech model that lets one person perform in the voice of another person, we need to have examples of both of them. The input actor that's impersonating and the target person. We need both of them to have said the same phrase. We have like 1,000 or 3,000 phrases, and we need both characters to have said exactly the same script. And then the model has a very clear, signal. Here's me saying hello. Here's Obama saying hello, whatever. And then, so that was the beginning. And we quickly realized that this was a huge friction point for our clients, because they provided, the target speaker is usually available. There's a bunch of pre-recorded information, but then they need to take the person who's impersonating and then go to the studio and spend 2 days there recording those phrases. So it was a huge friction point, and like a big, what kind of let us expanded a lot our the number of projects we could deliver is when we switched to the unsupervised approach, where we just need 2 sets of data from these 2 speakers, but they don't need to pronounce the same text. So that was a big improvement. And after that, after some time, we also stopped requiring to have examples of data of the input speaker at all. Mm-hmm. We just need examples of Mark Hamill or like whoever the target character is. And then once the model is trained, then any person can speak in it, and it will transform it into the target speaker. And now I think the way it works now is that you essentially have a set of different options. So varying from, still going for an hour of high quality material, that's how you get the best identity and the best quality, and all the way to zero shot on the other part of the spectrum, where zero shot is essentially when the model doesn't need to be trained to learn a new speaker. You just give it a small reference, like 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then it kind of tries to impersonate that speaker without training. That's also possible, but there's still trade-offs, significant trade-offs in terms of identity and recognizability.
I would imagine the fidelity is much dramatically lower in a zero-shot scenario versus something where you've given it some data to at least get it started.
I would say fidelity is not so different, because you can still, like, the zero-shot model is still pre-trained on a lot of human speech, so it knows how to produce high quality audio, but it doesn't know very well how to impersonate that particular speaker. So it will sound with high quality and kind of like that person. But if you listen to it for like a minute, you will start noticing that, oh, hey, maybe their accent is not just right. Maybe their timbre is not quite there. So it's more about identity rather than fidelity, I would say.
So Alex, maybe I could ask you about a couple of the memorable projects that Respeecher has been involved with. I know one of the first ones I became aware of, I remember reading an article about the work on The Mandalorian, the season finale, where you were asked to basically recreate the voice of a young Luke Skywalker. What was the process involved in that time for how you collaborated, and then I guess sort of how do you see how has the sort of time on the projects? Like I would imagine, because that feels very early in this synthetic voice days. So I feel like you were pioneering things. So I imagine everything just took longer. So I'm curious as to has it gotten infinitely faster or just moderately faster in the process? But to start a little bit with that project. Take us back.
Yeah, you're right. Mandalorian was one of the first big projects at Respeecher, and we were very lucky to start working with some of the greatest sound engineers out there who were residing in Skywalker Sound Studio. And maybe one of the reasons we were hired for those early projects by them is because they're also perfectionists when it comes to audio. So they were creating a lot of takes. They were creating like 1,000 takes for the movie, and we were training dozens of models. And those amount of takes were multiplied by the amount of models, and they had all this back and forth in order to perfect the sound. And it might have taken us 5-6 months to deliver the stuff for Mandalorian. But when we listen now to the Mandalorian outcome and compare that to the Book of Boba Fett outcome for the same voice, the Book of Boba Fett became way better to our ears because the technology has been developing, as well as the time to deliver was smaller. If we were engaged right now in a project similar to Mandalorian, it would take us maybe several weeks to make all the stuff done, but then it goes through the process of back and forth. So we need to address some particular things. In some cases, we need to address some particular vowels. And here is joint work of sound supervisors from the studio, our sound people, directors usually were involved into the process, and we just push it until everyone is satisfied about it.
Does the actor come in at some point and like sign off on their voice?
That's actually the very first one. So when we are engaged into the project, the very first question our team asks is, do they have permission from the target voice in order to create the target voice? Then if the permission is in place and all good with the project, we proceed with creating the models. But in many of the projects, those talents whose voices were created are actively involved into the process in order to guide, in order to give more context on how the character should sound. And in many cases, there are also some source speakers for the model, because when we do de-aging, when we make Tom Hanks sound very, very young, he might actually be a source speaker.
By the way, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Joel is acting as producer and will help make sure that we have those and can go through and answer. Doug, I actually wanted to ask you a question as well. I feel like we've seen synthetic audio come into play a couple of times. I know it sort of continually is an area that comes up. In particular, I know we've seen examples like artists reading their own works, a biography where they want to capture something in their words, even though they didn't actually ever say those things out loud. Are there other examples from the production side where you've explored or been interested in the places that synthetic audio can go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like so much of these technologies that are coming onto the market and entering our pipelines. There's almost infinite possibilities, right? So, like for example, I was working with a team to build a narrative podcast, and I think there's the opportunity to say we want a voice kind of like this, and you could almost get complete voice actors, where again, not cloning somebody necessarily, but coming up with a unique voice that you could use. Basic content creators and influencers, we're seeing a lot of that, where you have a lot of these headless videos where you don't have a talking head, but they're feeding it into a script and it's generating a voice, and those voices are very authentic, although they are not human voices. So it really runs the gamut from, the kid making his Minecraft videos, right? Who might want to age himself up at some point and sound more mature and get the frog out of his voice because he's 13 and his voice is changing, all the way up to, maybe a family video where you want to think about where you got a bunch of videos of grandpa and you want to hear what grandpa might have sounded like when he was 20, or things like that. I mean, the applications are really infinite.
We had at Microsoft, we had a very simple one where, there are often lots of presentations that I get asked to make around the world to various account teams. English is never not rarely their primary language. And so we just started using some of the own tech stack that we had and access to it in order to localize my voice into their languages, so that at least the first time they were viewing it, it was easier to process the information because they weren't having to jump through two hoops of translating mentally and listening to these complicated technical presentations. So I think there's honestly a wide range, both across entertainment and enterprise, and even eventually into just having more natural language sounding, AI helpers that are out there.
It really kind of spalls out from there when you consider tacking other technologies to it, like the phoneme matching, where now you're doing dubbing, where you get it in a natural language. Maybe you're even having that actor's voice speak in that language, so the voice is the same, but now you're taking masking in the visual and changing the phonemes, so you don't get that disconnect that we all saw in when the wuxia films came over from China, where there's this whole disconnect in the voice. It really helps with the suspension of disbelief if you're repurposing it into a new language.
We actually see a drastic shift right now happening in high-end industry when it comes to synthetic voice. So a couple of years ago, when we go to big studios who have been already clients and say that, look, we've been doing several projects a year with you, all in post-production, that's most probably going to change. We are building a platform for you to utilize synthetic voice on a big scale for all the use cases. What features you'd like us to build? And they were not able to answer because they were navigating through all those issues that are related to synthetic voice, to AI hype, to deep fakes. But now we see a lot of traction in pre-production when the synthetic voice is being used for pre-prod, for animation, for video games, to cast some characters, to try different voices, to enhance the process of creation. We see that synthetic voices entering hospitality use cases for amusement parks where you can actually interact with characters, stuff like that. We do quite a bit of work in audiobook space right now. For instance, Rick Hoffman is using our technology to release a second audiobook as of now, as well as for his podcast. And soon we are going to release an audiobook in a famous golfer's voice in Miranda House. Localization is something we've been doing for the last couple of years when those voices are being preserved in localized versions. And besides, like classical entertainment, we got some interesting traction in healthcare. So we try to apply our technology to help people with speech disabilities, like laryngectomy patients who have their vocal box removed and they use a special device to speak, and they sound really bad. And just applying real-time voice conversion technology on top of how they sound, we managed to improve the quality of their sound, so they're better understandable. And now we are at the era where AI agents are on spike, and in general, the way how we communicate with technology is being changed. And we yet to see voice-first interfaces. Those haven't appeared yet for global audience. Those appeared only for people with vision disabilities so far.
The laryngectomy use case is really kind of fascinating, right? So if I'm understanding you correctly, if you have a video of the person speaking, in their natural voice, then they have an accident which requires a laryngectomy. You could theoretically take their speech device and have it speak in their own natural voice, and not that kind of staccato, mechanical, echoey voice that we associate with laryngectomy devices.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, like with laryngectomies, like depending on the type of device they use, they're just usually, sometimes what I showed is the electrolarynx as a kind of a vocal cord simulator. You like press it against your throat, and then it starts like imitating vibrations. So it does have tone to it, but it's pretty robotic typically. And then another type of laryngectomy is EP, where there's no external device, but there's like a special valve here, and you need to press it in a certain way, and then you can kind of speak too. But both of those voices, are pretty unnatural, especially for female patients, because they usually sound very, rough and male-like. So, but it's still intelligible and very in a lot of cases. So what's remaining is to take that timbre and take the content and kind of convert it into a natural timbre. If there's recordings of their original voice, you could even do that.
What I find really fascinating about that is someone who spent my early career in direct care social services, working with TBI patients and other folks, right? That is such a huge quality of life indicator, because that disconnect with the voice from a laryngectomy decoder, I'm not sure if that's a correct term for the device, like being able to speak in a natural speaking voice at all, but then actually being able to speak in your own voice, right? Or in a voice you choose. So if someone has always not been able to speak, but then they can select a voice that they want to be theirs, they can own it, and then as an integration into the rest of society, it's a huge, like I can see that as a massive application.
So we had a question come into the chat from Johannes. He asked a couple of questions. First off, when you're synthesizing a voice for a feature film or a show, are you using a generic training model, or are you doing something specific for that project at the time? I think if I understood what you said earlier, you're starting with a base model, but then you're doing fine tunings, or are you creating something wholly new?
We are fine tuning, because typically we can't expect the client to provide, like hundreds of hours of audio. So we still need the model to know, what humans typically sound like and what the phonemes are and stuff like that, because there's a lot of commonality, obviously. And so, but then we fine tune, and which specific model we fine tune kind of depends on the use case, because we have a spectrum of different models. Like some of them are what we call low level, which means that, it just changes timbre, but it keeps all the aspects of their intonation. They keep their accent, the input speaker's accent. They keep everything from the person who's speaking into the model, and they only replace the timbre to that of the target speaker. So that's a low level model, and it's good if the actor who's impersonating is good actor and they have the same accent, or they can impersonate the accent, and then they can do the intonations. They can do like a good parody essentially, and we just need to adjust the timbre. But in other cases, when you need to adjust accent and when the person's speaking style is like very different from the target person, in that case, we use we train a high level model, which changes a lot more. It changes accent, it changes the intonations, it changes like a lot of things. But it kind of it only retains kind of the basic emotion and content.
Got it. Johannes had one other question. After you've created this model, who owns that?
Usually there's the production who owns the models, but there are still some cases where a target voice, an actor themselves, whose voice model we created, they own the model, and then they can reuse this model for other productions or for their needs when they're engaged in similar format.
Got it. This sort of leads me to another area of questions I have around this. I know Respeecher has been involved in commitments around how ethical AI will work and what some of the groundings are in it. I believe there was a partnership you joined in 2023 called the Partnership on AI. Could you talk a little bit about that and sort of where Respeecher sort of sees your responsibilities around how AI gets treated? Because obviously this is a pretty sensitive topic in Hollywood still.
Essentially, when we started the company with ethics code of conduct. So it's been coming from us as humans initially. We wanted to create this technology, but also we wanted to make sure that this technology would never be misused to fool people into making someone say something they never did. So we put very strong, very strict guardrails around our technology itself, but also the way how we approach our participation and talking about the synthetic voice has been also inspired by our ability to a little bit influence the agenda, because AI gets a lot of pushback. Whatever could be related to deepfake gets a lot of pushback, but the technology itself has amazing applications we identified. Therefore, we wanted to highlight those amazing applications, as well as make sure that whatever we are involved with as a company does not get into a gray zone. So we've been very cautious with that. And then at some point, it initially was driven by our human nature, but then at some point we understood that this market is driven by fear. Studios are quite fearful when they adopt new technologies and when they talk about those new technologies. Talent space is very fearful because their likeness is something they've been building as main asset over years. And the best response to fear is trust. So we've been building those two components at Respeecher, which is quality and trust, from the very first days. And talking about this partnership on AI, when we found out and got connected to Adobe and the team that was building the initiative, we've been already established somewhat as an agency in the industry, serving very high-profile projects there. And we were among first 6 companies who joined C2PA initiative, and other companies were at the scale of TikTok or BBC, so we were the smallest out there. Now we see that our ethics code has been adopted by many other ethical players in industry when it comes to visual transformation or utilizing AI to do lip sync. That's something that has been established as basic rules in the industry, as well as it's been confirmed recently by Screen Sectors Guild in their resolution. And their resolution of the strikes even less harsh than our requirements when we engage into the projects.
Interesting. I feel like, and this is a conversation or an argument I feel like I have a lot, is that the technology itself is not inherently bad or inherently evil. It is technology. It is the business practices that surround it that begin to bring the connotation. So I feel like we need to spend less time worrying about AI, we need to keep doing a great job of being transparent about how it gets used, where it's being used. But we need to really scrutinize the business policies, the business practices around it, because that ultimately is the part that I think is leaving a sour taste in both creatives' attitudes towards it as a technology, but the open concerns that we have right now as well.
Spot on, and that's exactly what John Favreau has been saying about one of the first big applications of synthetic voice in Hollywood, in Mandalorian.
Interesting. We have a couple more that have questions that have come in. They're both related to dubbing, so I'm going to combine both Vladimir and Simon's questions. Vladimir asked if you can use it for dubbing in a foreign language. Simon asked that as you're dealing with it, how do you deal with languages that have radically different sentence structures, such as German, for an example, where the verb is usually at the end of the sentence versus starting near the beginning in English. So how are you handling localizations, and then sort of at a Uber level, how are you handling sort of the complexities of language differences?
Yeah, so there are several approaches to how you could use synthetic speech for dubbing, and one of them is you could use speech to speech, for example, which means that you still need like a person. It could be like a single actor who dubs the whole movie, and then it gets converted into multiple different character voices. So in this case, you don't really have that problem, because the dubbing person will have adapted their intonation accordingly to the language structure, right? Because it's a dubbing actor. So in that case, the problem doesn't really exist. But of course, if you want to do like a fully automated dub with text to speech, I mean, I think what happens is it just needs to. So the text-to-speech model, it is trained in the target language. Like, for example, it's trained in German, so it knows basic how intonation works and how intonations are connected to language on a certain level. So the model itself makes plausible intonations, and the only thing that's missing is to tell it what the original emotion was, kind of roughly, not very precisely exactly, and then the model will do its best to convey that emotion and adapt it to German, for example.
In a scenario like that, are you talking about like an individual model that's doing all of that, or is this like multiple agents that are working in conjunction to bring the various parts like intonation and others together? So is it one self-contained item, or are you talking about multiple AI technologies effectively working together?
I think there's like always in AI, you could either do things end-to-end way, which is you could train one big model that you just give it, text and whatever inputs you have, and then it produces the output automatically. Or you could build like modular models. You can have an emotion extractor that is connected to like a translation model, and that is connected to a text-to-speech model. And there's like different pros and cons to that. So the end-to-end models, even though, they're kind of magical, but they usually require a lot of training. And when they do make mistakes, there's very little you can do to correct that, because it's
sort of a black box at that point.
Exactly.
Right.
And also the black box is not very much directable when it comes to making it perform in the exact way. And that's what we've seen in the industry. So for a couple of years, by now, the high-end industry, meaning those feature films, animation, high-end animation, they've been looking for push-of-the-button dubbing. And they found out it does not work, not just because humans have to be involved in the process of translation, in the process of bringing the regional context to the translated material. Humans also have to be involved in voiceover, because when you need to whisper, cry, sing, do some stuff that's of a human nature, not just classical text to speech. It's just easier. It's better to get a human actor to be doing that, because they are best in terms of performing, and they're best in terms of being guided how to perform. So now we see that industry is being divided into two parts. When it comes to lower tier quality content, push of the button dubbing could work, and it starts being adapted using those text-to-speech models and some automated translation underneath. But when it comes to high-end humans, local actors are being enhanced with the technology in order to act in the different voices, and in some cases in the voices of originals.
Yeah, so there's no foreseeable future, particularly on that high end, where there's not a human. In fact, there's probably multiple humans in the loop for those high end productions.
Yeah, it seems so. I mean, the industry have been trying different things, and now we see that that's a new wave of just abandoning the idea of push of the button localization and working on the workflows, how we inject synthetic voice into the workflow of voiceover. And the challenges there is time to deliver, and time to deliver in different languages in different regions. So we saw cases when in Europe, some piece of Paramount content has been delayed for several months just because one company in Europe was not able to deliver in time because they had absence of actors in place during the summer.
Got it. I'm sort of curious. I mean, you touched on sort of the Brutalist. I mentioned early on that there were a lot of different shows that you were involved with that sort of got notoriety this year. I was sort of wondering, sort of like, what is next? Where is the technology roadmap going? Where are the projects taking you? I feel like I see more and more games also starting to come into it. So you as a company, where are you going? And then where do you see this technology going beyond what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, in the general space, we see that all those use cases other than ADR post-production are finally becoming a thing for the industry. And there are a lot of those use cases in pre-prod, in prod, in post, in marketing, in trailers, in amusement parks. So that finally is being adopted by the industry, but there's nothing like specifically new in terms of the technology to serve those use cases. So technology has been ready. The thing is, the industry starts to adopt those use cases. But being very deep into the sound space, we see right now that some of the items we are looking into adding on our roadmap and start working on. So we see that text-to-speech, for instance, can become more directable thing. And we are working on making it happen. We are also working on ease of delivery. So we want to be on top of the fingers of the sound professionals, of creators, where they can easily integrate synthetic voice in whatever they are building. Then it wouldn't take them long, and it wouldn't take them those loops of just getting through conversations with our team when it's all ethical from the very beginning.
Got it. So you're a lot of the focus right now is really not about improving the quality. It's about making it easier, more friction-free to access the technology and implement it.
That's right. But I would disagree about the quality, because it's been constant thing at Respeecher. We keep improving on the quality all the time, meaning that we make it require less data, we make it work faster, we make it train faster, we make inference faster, we make it more usable. But from maybe early 2024, late 2023, we started to pay special attention to scalability of the technology.
I was curious, and I sort of started to ask this earlier, and we moved on in the other questions, but how has that optimization looked? Is it radically different now in training that model versus 2 years ago or 3 years ago when you were working on some of the Disney productions? Is it, what's the speed to having a finished model, I guess, now versus then?
Yeah, surprisingly, the data requirements didn't change that much. Well, aside from the fact that we do have like zero shot, still like the thing that's used the most is like a standard, 30-minute of like quality data that we train on or fine tune on. So I wouldn't think that I would say that the data requirements changed that much, but yeah, we can now we can train models in like a couple of days rather than in the early days we would do it. We would train a model like for a week and then only to find out that it doesn't work, and then we kind of make adjustments. You try to make it work, and we didn't have as many sound engineers on the team, so it's the machine learning people who are like involved with Lucasfilm sound engineers and trying to understand what it is that they don't like, because it kind of sounds fine to us. So it was kind of it was kind of interesting. Yeah, but now it's sort of on the rails. We have different processes with different data requirements. So ranging from, as I said, like zero shot to about like a week to fine tune a model and get it delivered.
Wow. And also, one of the pieces of improvement has been that we learned how to train many voices in one training run. So before that, we had to include just one voice when we train the model, and now we can throw there like 50 or 100 voices. And it would require very similar resource in order to train the models, but it would drastically reduce the cost of introducing voices to the system.
Very good. Doug, I don't want to hog the conversation. I know you had a couple of thoughts in here. Did you have any questions for Alex or Dimitro specifically on their tech or in the production angles for how this is being used?
Yeah, I guess I have more, like as we've been talking, I think of a lot of use cases, and I'm wondering if you guys have already done something like this or if this would be applicable. So one idea that I have is, so for animation, for example, you hire an actor, but they have to do a very specific, apology, you might hear my dogs in the background, very specific kind of tone, right? So let's say I think immediately of like an actress who has a deep voice. They want the gravitas, but the character is a child, right? So you're going to take that tone and you're going to adapt it with the actor's involvement, but to get to a voice that sounds like it would be a child, or essentially if you take Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, right? And you take the person, now they're small, but now they have to talk to a full-size adult and they have a diminutive version of their voice. Can you talk about those kind of essentially special effects in the space?
Yeah, and we've been doing that on production scale. So for some of the big video games, we actually did this voices where a person grew up and could not perform in like 12 or 14 version of their voice. They're now 17. But also you touched a very important point in the voice acting space. They used to call it character voices. So when they have to do something really hard in order to achieve this voice, and voice actors say that in some cases for those character voices, they can perform for like half an hour, 40 minutes, and they have to rest all day long just because it hurts. It's really hard for the vocal cords. And in such cases, we can actually train the models in their character voice, and they can perform in an easier way, longer, without this hurt to get the character voice work done, which is very cool application. They appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, I was just going to add that you would want to use the high level model for this use case, especially if like a grown up person needs to talk in like a child's voice or something. For that, you would want to use the high level model because it's not just the timbre. If you just change the timbre to like a child's timbre, the person kind of tends to sound. The result is sort of like has like a chipmunk effect. So it's kind of the timbre is kind of there, but it still sounds like a grown up person for some reason. So like you want to use a high level model to also change the the accent, the way they tend to pronounce phonemes. and at that point, it kind of starts being sounding believable as if the real child is talking.
Fascinating. And you mentioned that this comes up a lot in the games. Is there a big difference between working on a game character versus a live action character for a production?
It is, and the main difference is in timing. So basically, for the video game, they might require a talent to deliver like 40 hours of voiceover, in some cases 80 hours of voiceover. That's a lot comparing to a film. The whole duration of the film could be like 1.5 hours. Maybe in case of Brutal is 3.5, but still it's way less. And also there is a difference in the flow, in the process. So when the movie is being shot, they take the sound out there, then they do post-production, then they do ADR, and those are like two processes that are happening one by one. When they do video game, they introduce changes to the story plot all the time, even until the release, meaning that talents have to be available for all those changes. And those could be not tiny changes. Those could require massive work, and having the talents available all the time is not an easy one. As well as when they engage with very high demand talent, like Hollywood celebrity for a video game. In many cases, they cannot just spend that much time in front of microphone. Therefore, they can use synthesized voices of them in order to deliver all this. And what we see now that video games are paying more and more attention to high quality text to speech, because many of the video games are being the story plot is being created and delivered right on spot when the gamer is playing the game. So it's not just classical storyline game. And in order to enable that, you need high quality text to speech that would work fast in order to respond to be interactive to the player.
Yeah, it had occurred to me that the ratio of dialogue would be that radically different for a game, but makes perfect sense when you consider a lot of these, particularly AAA games, are like a 60 or 80 hour playthrough time versus a 2-hour film.
Yeah, but also because there's like a bunch of scenarios typically in games, like you have branching, and then the same actor must record all different possibilities, which I think is actually going to change as these smart AI agents become start appearing in games, and probably, as Alex mentioned, probably like a text to speech would replace a lot of that dialogue, because we want AI in the game to be interactive, not just be good at shooting at you, but also be good at talking to you.
Do you see that as a near-term thing that is actively being worked on as an innovation, or is it something that's a little longer out to get that latency and the reaction times for text to speech to be something that really works in a game?
Now, I think the tech is there. I think it's coming, should be coming very soon, because a gaming GPU is crazy powerful. It can run all the text to speech in the world at a fraction of its capacity. So I think the tech is really there. Well, of course, you also need an LLM, and then there's another question. But games could use APIs and stuff. So I think the gaming companies will experiment with that more. And we're actually hearing that from the industry, that they're already like playing around with this. So we'll see how soon it comes.
And also we see that the industry starts bringing those use cases which are not obligatory related to the voices of the story. Those use cases start being related to the voices of the players, meaning the players can communicate in massive multiplayer online game in a different voice and the voice of the character, or vice versa. The system itself, the video game itself, can consume the player's voice, and then all the dialogues from the character the player is playing for would be performed in the voice of the player, which is quite cool application.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so one of the ways I see AAA games evolving, right, is particularly the MMOs, where it's kind of a live environment and people are playing, is I think we'll get to a place where there's a show Bible and there's a character Bible, and how that character speaks, but the player will be able to interact with the character and have them give a natural response in the voice actor's voice. Does that seem like a viable future application?
Yeah, from the tech standpoint, the tech is there and they start to adopt it. I mean, the thing is, the video games it takes time to create them, and they're in the cycle right now. So those video games that started to be developed like in early 2024 are going to be released in the end of 2025, and we will already see some of those applications out there.
Very cool. It's an exciting time to be a creator of anything, really, with all these technologies coming online and the way they're going to enable new ways of telling stories and more interactive. Like, I think that's one of the big things, the VR, AR, MR kind of world. That's going to be the automated voice generation based off of either an exemplars of an actor is going to be really powerful in creating immersive experiences as we go forward.
Well, and I think an area here that even just from this conversation, I feel like I've gotten a better grasp in my head around is that we don't have a lot of audio first user interactions today, unless there's accessibility issues that are there. But I think part of that has maybe been driven by the lack of natural sounding language as part of it. And I think as the technology gets there for there to be such a low latent interaction, that it feels like we're just talking to another person, we're likely to become more reliant on those and use them. Particularly, I think where the LLM can mimic the features of a human voice. Rarely do we speak in whole perfect sentences. We tend to sort of stutter or hesitate our way through it in a way that just sounds naturalistic to us. And I think the more it starts to sound like that, the more we're likely to rely on it in the future.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the general shift has happened in the industry when our computer, our smartphone has become a different thing. Before this, it was just an instrument, just a tool. Now it's more a partner, and the best way to communicate with something that is human-like a partner is using the verbal channel. That's why we see that it's actively developing and appearing. And the technology of the synthetic voice is already there, and the technology of basically having partner in your device is already there. So they're now grouping up together, a really cool time. As well as those use cases would require some cool voices out there, some famous voices out there. We would like to communicate with ChatGPT having the voice of a particular Hollywood celebrity of our choice.
We only have about 5 minutes left, so I want to encourage anybody with any last questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I have one last one I want to sort of propose to both you, Dimitro and Alex. And honestly, Doug, I'd love your opinions on this as well. If someone's watching this and they've been on the fence around AI, they know they're experimenting with GPT, but when they hear things like this, they get a little overwhelmed. What is the thing you wish they would go off and learn or research to educate themselves more around this space? What do you think is most helpful to someone who has questions as they are wanting to seek information around this? Alex, I'll pick on you first.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, in general, it's very important to understand that there is a lot of misconception in this industry. So we used to mix in our head all those different technologies. We might mix the capabilities of ChatGPT with the capabilities of the synthetic voice and those implications on our life. We could be scared of the synthetic voice, even though we should still pay attention to quite a lot of amazing applications of the synthetic voice if it's used ethically. Therefore, we have to clearly divide in our heads what exactly we are looking at and what are the use cases for the technology when because it's very common for human nature to be scared of something we don't understand in full. And just to get this care as a part of the learning process could highly benefit the learning process.
Dimitro, what about you? How do we help educate people? What should they go learn if they had one opportunity to have a takeaway?
Yeah, I'd say learn to use read up on how to use ChatGPT as efficiently as possible, because I don't know, like, it changed my life. I guess it changed a lot of people's lives in terms of like it's such a great explainer device. Like if you're not sure about something, whether it's dangerous or not, how it works under the hood, what the implications are, you can just go ahead and ask the ultimate expert, and then you'll get a lot of answers. I mean, especially if you tell them what your background, if you tell the ChatGPT what your background is, it will kind of adjust its answers so that they're more kind of digestible for you, given your background. And I don't know, I think I would say, use it more to learn to educate yourself about AI and how things work under the hood.
So I think I'm hearing just dive in and start using it, but provide context. And this is something I feel like I've seen that is true. I see a lot of people just trying to use it like they do Google search, and it's very different. That's a very different style of interaction, where you're just gleaning across data versus trying to find the relevant context for it.
Yeah, exactly. Provide context about you, because you came to ChatGPT to get things answered, and then you should tell it about your background, who you are, what kind of answers do you expect, and that will make them way more digestible than kind of just the generic information you search on Google.
Doug, any thoughts around what the audience should take away from you?
Yeah, I would, just to riff on everything you guys just said, right? Like, definitely start with ChatGPT. My wife actually kind of jokes around with me because I'm talking to ChatGPT a lot. I'm like, I got an idea. I talk to, because you can just literally talk to it. You can hit and I'm like, I have this idea for an article. Here's what I basically want to say. I need some resources to support it, and let it go out to the web and bring those things back, right? And what I've been diving into Claude and ChatGPT in earnest for about 3 years. And what I've come to realize is that the more you talk to it as a person, and it's weird because now we're getting into like Her, the movie Her, right? Like a virtual person. But the more you think about it, not so much that ChatGPT as a person, but you just speak to it naturally, right? Ask it natural questions. And with every iteration of the LLMs, they get better at parsing what you're trying to say and being able to create an instruction set. And then within that chat, it's holding the memory, right? So it knows the context that you've been talking to it in. Then if you go into projects, you can actually add context to it, right? You can give it your resume, to Dimitro's point, and say, this is who I am, right? Make a second me, or make a smarter me, or whatever, right? So just explore it, and when we were back a couple years back in the summer when WGA went on strike and SAG went on strike, right? This was a big topic, right? Because a lot of my screenwriter friends were afraid, they're just going to replace us. And so were the actors, right? And I think Ben Affleck did a piece at Davos or something, where he talked about the fact that you can't, we're a long way from being able to completely replicate an actor, right? And even then, I don't know that we can count on these LLMs and other tools to do that. The human element's always going to be there. So kind of get past your fear of being replaced, and start to think about these tools as an enhancement. And Mo Guadat, who's somebody I pay a lot of attention to, he talks about it being your second brain, and it's basically a force multiplier on your IQ. And so if you start to frame it that way, then I think a lot of the fear goes away. And as long as you're engaging with it ethically, or engaging with partners like Respeecher, who have this ethics platform at the very base of their business, then, it's going to be transformational to the way you work and to the way you live in a lot of ways.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And couldn't agree more. And Alex and Dimitro, I know we're at the end of the session. I just want to give you a chance. If someone wants to learn more about ReSpeecher or the work you guys are doing, where should they be going and looking?
In cinema, but also they can check our website, respeecher.com.
What an excellent answer. Thank you again for spending the time. I feel like I learned a lot here as part of this, and I thought it was a great conversation. So looking forward to hopefully seeing one or both of you at NAB in a couple of short weeks, and looking forward to having more conversations like this in the future.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.